Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're tackling something, well, truly foundational. Central pattern generators. CPGs for short.
Hmm.
Think of them as your body's internal conductors, these neural circuits orchestrating rhythmic movements like breathing and walking,
Hmm.
often completely automatically.
Exactly. And what's really compelling, I think, is this intricate relationship between the CPGs, the precise rhythm of our breath, and then that subtle dance of tension and relaxation in our muscles.
Yeah,
It's a remarkably sort of self-governing system, really coordinated.
right. And understand this core connection isn't just like fascinating biology, is it?
No, not at all.
These same principles are actually informing cutting-edge robotics,
Yeah.
helping machines move with much greater fluidity, more adaptability.
True.
And we'll also touch on maybe a potentially groundbreaking area,
Okay.
how this knowledge might one day, inform manual therapy techniques.
Yeah, that's an interesting angle. So our goal today basically is to unpack these fundamental mechanisms, the ones driving our bodily rhythms. We'll explore how these insights are not only deepening our understanding of how we function, but also opening doors to exciting innovations in technology and perhaps even therapeutic approaches down the line.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Where does this whole breathing rhythm actually originate? In our bodies, I mean.
Right. So the primary breathing CPZ, it resides in the brainstem,
Yeah.
specifically in the medulla oblongata.
Okay, the medulla.
And within this area, there are key centers. You've got the pre-Butzinger complex, pre-Butzi, people call it.
Pre-Butzi. Got it.
That's considered the main pacemaker for the inspiratory rhythm. That's when we breathe in.
Right.
Then we have the Butzinger complex, or Butzi, and that plays a really significant role in expiration, breathing out.
So a dedicated piece of our brain hardware just focused on keeping us breathing. That's pretty fundamental.
It is.
And you mentioned these are neural circuits. What does that actually mean? How do they operate?
Well, these complexes, they're networks of neurons.
Hmm.
And crucially, they involve both excitatory neurons, the ones that drive activity.
The go signals.
Yeah, basically. And inhibitory neurons, which help to shape and, importantly, time that activity.
Ah, okay.
Think of it like a finely tuned engine with both accelerators and brakes working together
Right.
to create that smooth rhythm.
That makes sense, a balance. Activation and suppression creating the rhythm. And breathing itself,
Yeah.
it isn't just one continuous thing, is it? You mentioned phases.
That's correct, yeah. We typically describe three main phases. First, inhalation, where specific muscles contract, expand our chest.
Okay.
Then there's early exhalation, which is more of a transitional phase.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, active exhalation. That happens during more forceful breathing, like if you're exercising hard.
Right, blowing out candles.
Exactly. And each of these phases is driven by specific patterns of neuronal firing within that CPG network.
All right, so the brainstem CPG sets the pace, dictates these phases, but how does that actually translate into the movement? The actual movement of our breathing muscles.
Right.
How does the CPG signal the diaphragm to contract and then relax at exactly the right moment?
Yeah, this is where that precise timing orchestrated by the CPG really shines. The respiratory CPG sends out signals that coordinate the contraction and relaxation of all the various respiratory muscles.
Okay.
And a key concept here is something called the half-center hypothesis.
Half center.
Yeah. Think of it like two opposing teams on a seesaw.
Oh.
When one team is strongly active, it pushes down and it inhibits the other team.
Right.
In this case, the circuits controlling inhalation and the circuits controlling exhalation, they mutually inhibit each other.
Uh-huh.
So this back and forth suppression is absolutely essential for creating that alternating rhythm of our breath.
Okay, so it's this reciprocal inhibition. That's what creates this sort of ebb and flow of breathing muscle activity.
Precisely.
Can you give us some specific examples, like what muscles are doing what during these phases?
Absolutely. So during inhalation, the diaphragm, that big dome-shaped muscle at the base of your chest, that contracts and flattens out. At the same time, your external intercostal muscles, the ones between your ribs,
Mm-hmm.
they also contract and they lift and expand the rib cage.
Okay.
Interestingly, during quiet breathing, just normal breathing, our abdominal muscles tend to remain relaxed during that inhale phase.
Okay.
Then during exhalation, the diaphragm and those external intercostals, they relax. That allows the lungs to just naturally recoil like an elastic band snapping back.
So it's passive most.
Think quiet breathing, yeah, largely a passive process. However, during more forceful exhalation, like we said, blowing out candles or coughing,
Right.
then the abdominal muscles will contract pretty strongly to help push air out more vigorously.
Wow. It's a beautifully coordinated sequence, isn't it? muscle engagement, disengagement, all directed by these tiny circuits in the brainstem.
It really is.
Now let's zoom in a bit more. What's happening at the level of the individual neurons inside the CPG? What
Yeah.
allows them to generate this rhythmic firing in the first place?
Okay, yeah. That delves into some pretty fascinating neurophysiology. Essentially, these neurons have internal oscillators, you could say,
Yeah.
and a complex communication system that allows them to fire in these coordinated rhythmic bursts. Many of them exhibit what are called pacemaker potentials.
Pacemaker potentials, like a tiny battery.
Sort of. It's a slow, gradual increase in electrical charge across their membrane. And
Hmm.
they also have these specific channels, hyperpolarization activated cation channels.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, they become active when the neuron's charge drops low, and they help bring it back up towards the point where it can fire again.
So they help reset it.
Exactly. And then there's the crucial role of chemical signaling, neurotransmitters.
Right.
Excitatory ones like glutamate act as the on switches,
Right.
basically causing depolarization and firing,
Hmm.
while inhibitory neurotransmitters like glycine act as the off switches, suppressing activity.
Got it. Push and pull.
Push and pull. And then you also have things like NMDA receptors and calcium-dependent potassium channels involved, particularly in resetting the neuron after it fires. It's a whole complex dance.
Wow, it's like a miniature, incredibly precise electrical and chemical dance happening within these cells.
Mhm.
And you mentioned something earlier, post-inhibitory rebound. What's
Yeah.
the significance of that for the timing, of muscle tension and relaxation shifts?
Right. Post-inhibitory rebound is a really clever mechanism, actually. When a CPG neuron is inhibited, its activity suppressed, right?
Yeah.
But when that suppression is suddenly lifted, the neuron often doesn't just return to its baseline level. It shows this brief but strong burst of firing, a rebound.
Okay.
And this phenomena is thought to be absolutely vital for the precise timing of when muscles switch between tension and relaxation.
How so?
Well, for example, the inhibition of an expiratory neuron might lead to a post-inhibitory rebound in an inspiratory neuron once that inhibition is removed, which helps facilitate that smooth handoff between breathing out and then breathing back in again.
So it's not just about the on and off signals themselves, but the way they transition. That helps time the very next action.
Exactly. It adds another layer of precision to the rhythm.
Okay. Now, our breathing isn't always constant, is it? I mean, it adapts to our activity, our emotions, even the air around us. How does the CPG know when to speed up or slow down, or tell us to take deeper breaths?
That's a great point. The respiratory CPG isn't some rigid clockwork system just ticking away. It's constantly being fine-tuned by all sorts of feedback mechanisms.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, one key source is chemical receptors. You have central chemoreceptors right there in the medulla, and they're super sensitive to changes in carbon dioxide levels and pH in the brain fluid.
Right. CO2 buildup.
Exactly. And then you have peripheral chemoreceptors located in the carotid arteries and the aorta, and they monitor oxygen and carbon dioxide levels in the blood itself. These receptors send signals back to the CPG to adjust breathing rate and depth based on these chemical shifts. It's like the body's internal air quality monitoring system, you could say.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Our body needs more oxygen. It needs to get rid of more CO2 when we're active, so breathing automatically adjusts.
Precisely.
What other kinds of feedback are involved in this constant adjustment?
We also have stretch receptors actually located in the lungs. They sense how much the lungs are inflated.
Ah, like a safety valve.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
If they get too full, these receptors send signals back to inhibit inhalation and promote exhalation. It helps prevent overinflation, a built-in safety mechanism.
Probably.
And additionally, there's feedback coming from muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs located within the respiratory muscles themselves, the diaphragm, the intercostals.
What do?
They provide information about muscle length and tension. That allows for even finer adjustments to the breathing pattern moment by moment.
So it's this continuous loop. Sensing and responding, sensing and responding. Sure. And you also mentioned earlier that higher brain centers can influence our breathing. How do our conscious thoughts or, say, our emotional states come into play?
Absolutely. Our cerebral cortex, the thinking part of our brain, allows for voluntary control over breathing.
Right, like holding your breath.
Exactly. We can consciously decide to hold our breath, or take a really deep breath, or breathe rapidly on command. Then there's the pons, another part of the brainstem, which also contributes to fine-tuning the respiratory rhythm, making it smoother.
Okay.
And maybe most interestingly, the limbic system, which is heavily involved in our emotions,
Oh, yeah.
can dramatically impact our breathing patterns.
Yeah.
Just think about how your breathing changes when you're anxious or scared.
Yeah, it gets fast and shallow.
Right, it often becomes faster and shallower. So these higher level influences can absolutely override or modify the basic rhythm being generated down in the medullary CPG.
So the CPG is the core rhythm generator, the engine room maybe. But it's constantly receiving information and being modulated by this whole network of sensors and higher brain functions.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Now, the name itself, Central Pattern Generator, kind of suggests it might be involved in more than just breathing.
Right.
Is that actually the case?
Oh, absolutely. That's a crucial point. The concept of CPGs extends far, far beyond respiration. They are fundamental to a huge array of other rhythmic movements.
Like what?
Well, locomotion is a big one.
Uh-huh.
Things like walking, running, swimming, crawling, even chewing involve CPGs.
Chewing? Really?
Yep. And in the insect world, think about things like flight, the rhythmic wing beats.
Wow.
So this basic principle of having a central neural circuit that can self-generate rhythmic patterns is a really widespread biological strategy. It's not just about breathing.
It's incredible to think that the same underlying principle governs such a diverse range of movements. Are there any, like, compelling examples of CPG research in different species that really highlight this?
Oh, definitely. There's a really rich body of research across the animal kingdom. Studies in mollusks, for instance, have revealed CPGs controlling their rhythmic crawling movements.
Okay.
Fish utilize CPGs located in their spinal cord to generate those alternating muscle contractions they need for swimming.
Right. Side-to-side motion.
Exactly. Birds rely on CPGs for the rhythmic flapping of their wings during flight. And there are landmark studies, quite famous ones, in cats with spinal cord injuries.
Oh, yeah.
They showed that even without signals coming down from the brain, the spinal TPGs could still produce the basic stepping pattern in their hind legs when they were placed on a treadmill.
Whoa. Just from the spinal cord itself.
Just from the spinal cord CPG, yes,
Easy.
triggered by the sensory input from the treadmill. And in insects, as we touched on, CPGs are vital for everything from walking to the incredibly complex coordinated movements of flight and even the sort of wave-like crawling you see in larvae.
That really underscores how fundamental and, I guess, conserved these neural circuits are
Right.
across so many different species.
It really does. It's a very efficient biological design.
And you mentioned they can be modulated. So even though the basic pattern is generated internally, it's not completely hardwired or inflexible.
Right. Precisely. That's key. CPG networks show a remarkable degree of modularity and adaptability. Sensory input plays an absolutely vital role in modulating their activity.
How so?
Well, it allows movements to be adjusted based on the environment. For example, if you step on an uneven surface while you're walking, sensory feedback from your foot and leg will instantly modify the activity of your leg CPGs to help you maintain balance and not trip.
Oh, okay. Quick adjustments.
Very quick adjustments. Similarly, descending commands from the brain can also modulate CPGs. That allows us to voluntarily change our walking speed or change direction or decide to stop walking altogether.
Right.
And there's even some fascinating research suggesting that CPGs might act as feedback predictors in models of human walking.
Feedback predictors. What does that mean?
It means they might essentially anticipate the sensory consequences of the movement they're generating and potentially even replace some of the slower traditional feedback signals in controlling the movement smoothly.
That's a fascinating idea. The body almost predicting its own necessary adjustments before they even happen.
It's a really active area of research.
Now, let's bring the focus back to breathing for a moment.
Yeah.
We've discussed how it's controlled, but how does the act of breathing itself influence our overall muscle tension? Beyond just the respiratory muscles, I mean. Is there a broader connection?
Yes, absolutely. There's a significant broader connection, and it works primarily through the autonomic nervous system.
Okay, the sympathetic and parasympathetic.
Exactly. Inhalation tends to be associated with an activation of the sympathetic nervous system. That's our fight or flight response.
Right.
And this sympathetic activation can lead to a general increase in overall muscle tension throughout the body, not just the breathing muscles.
Interesting.
Conversely, exhalation tends to promote activity in the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system.
Okay.
And that generally results in a decrease in muscle tension and promotes a state of relaxation.
Wow.
So a really key key insight here is that something as fundamental as how we inhale and exhale isn't just about gas exchange, it's a direct lever we have on our overall state of muscular tension.
So the very act of breathing, inhale versus exhale, can subtly but significantly shift our body's overall state of tension.
Hmm.
And this implies that the way we breathe, whether it's shallow and rapid versus slow and deep, could have distinct effects on our general muscle tone.
Exactly right. Shallow, rapid breathing patterns are very often linked to a sympathetic dominant state, sort of that stressed state, and they can absolutely contribute to increased muscle tension generally.
Okay.
On the other hand, slow, deep breathing tends to favor parasympathetic activity, and it can be a very, very effective tool for promoting muscle relaxation throughout the entire body.
This sounds like it has really direct real-world applications. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm thinking of relaxation techniques that always emphasize long exhales.
Yes.
Is that the underlying physiological mechanism at work there?
That's exactly it. Many, many relaxation techniques that focus on prolonged exhalation are indeed leveraging this precise connection between breathing and the autonomic nervous system to promote muscle relaxation. That common advice you hear, take a long, slow exhale when you're feeling stressed. It's deeply rooted in this physiology we're talking about.
Makes sense.
We also see this principle in action in things like sports, where athletes are often coached to exhale during exertion, like lifting a heavy weight.
Why is that?
Well, it can help stabilize the core, but it also aligns with that natural tendency towards relaxation or at least controlled tension release during the exhale phase, potentially optimizing muscle force production too.
Interesting.
And of course, in practices like yoga, pranayama, the breath control techniques, they are specifically designed to influence both the physical and mental states, and that very much includes manipulating muscle tension through breath.
It's just amazing how something we do completely unconsciously, thousands of times a day, can have such a profound and wide-ranging impact on our whole physical state.
It really is fundamental.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the technological side. You mentioned that the principles of CPGs are being applied in robotics. How exactly is that being done? What does that look like?
Yeah, the principles of CPGs are proving to be incredibly valuable in designing control systems, especially for legged robots.
Okay. Walking robot.
Exactly. By creating artificial neural networks that mimic the rhythmic output of biological CPGs, engineers can build robots that exhibit much more robust and adaptable locomotion,
More natural movement.
more natural and more resilient. Instead of relying solely on complex, pre-programmed step-by-step movements, these CPG-inspired robots can generate their own rhythmic patterns.
Right.
That allows them to navigate uneven terrain, recover from small disturbances much more naturally, much like an animal does.
So it's about making robots more autonomous, less dependent on constant external commands for every single movement.
Precisely. There's a lot of research focused on developing these bio-inspired neural networks that incorporate CPGs, aiming for what's sometimes called multi-skill locomotion.
Multi-skill.
Yeah, meaning a single robot could potentially walk, run, maybe even climb stairs or hop and recover from falls, all managed by a unified control system that's inspired by these biological rhythm generators.
Wow.
The ability to adapt to diverse terrains and unexpected situations is a huge advantage for robots in many real-world applications, search and rescue, exploration.
That sounds incredibly promising
Mhm.
for the future of robotics, making them much more capable in complex environments.
Definitely.
Now, you also hinted earlier at a potential connection to manual therapy, and this is where it gets really interesting for me, and maybe for some of our listeners.
Hmm.
Given everything we've discussed, the CPGs, the timing of muscle activation and relaxation linked to breathing, the autonomic shifts,
Hmm.
could this offer any insights into manual therapies? Things like osteopathy, chiropractic adjustments, massage, other hands-on techniques.
Right.
Specifically, could the timing of applying pressure or adjustments be linked to these natural bodily rhythms?
Okay, this is where, as you say, it gets really interesting, but we also venture into a more speculative area. It's potentially very fruitful for future research, though.
Oh.
The fascinating potential here is that just as robots seem to benefit from mimicking these natural rhythms, perhaps our therapeutic touch, our manual interventions, could be more effective if they're more attuned to the body's inherent timing. The idea is that the natural rhythms governed by CPGs, particularly in relation to the breathing cycle, and those associated shifts in muscle tension and autonomic nervous system activity we talked about, could potentially create optimal windows for certain manual therapy interventions.
So the concept is that there might be specific moments within these bodily rhythms, like during the exhale maybe, where therapeutic techniques like a joint adjustment or a specific muscle release technique could be more effective or maybe received better by the body.
That's exactly the idea being floated. Could the phases of breathing, with their accompanying changes in muscle tone, nervous system activity, maybe even local tissue fluid dynamics, could they create moments when the body is physiologically more receptive to certain types of manual input?
Right.
Now, it's crucial to emphasize this is a question that requires significant further investigation. It's not something explicitly supported by the sources we typically draw on for established facts today.
Okay, so it's theoretical at this point.
Very much so. But the fundamental mechanisms we've discussed, the tight coupling between CPGs, respiration, autonomic state, and muscle tone, certainly suggest that this interplay is a crucial aspect of the body's overall dynamics.
Mhm.
So, future research might explore whether synchronizing manual therapy techniques with these intrinsic rhythms could potentially enhance therapeutic outcomes.
Like what, for example?
Well, for instance, could applying a gentle joint mobilization technique during a specific phase of exhalation, when general muscle tension tends to be lower due to parasympathetic activity,
Hmm.
could that be more effective or perhaps perceived as more comfortable by the patient than doing it during an inhale?
I see.
Or could certain soft tissue techniques be timed to coincide with moments of maximum relaxation within the respiratory cycle? It's a really compelling area for future exploration, linking basic neuroscience to clinical practice.
That's a really thought-provoking connection to consider. It really takes us from the very basic neural circuitry, deep in the brainstem, all the way to potential applications in, well, advanced robotics on one hand, and potentially the art of hands-on healing on the other.
Absolutely. And I think the more we unravel the intricacies of these fundamental biological rhythms, the more opportunities might arise to leverage that knowledge across really diverse fields, ultimately perhaps to improve both machine function and human health and well-being.
Okay, let's try and bring it all together then as we wrap up this deep dive. We've explored these central pattern generators, the CPGs. We've seen how they are just fundamental to our rhythmic movements,
Mhm.
with breathing and muscle tension being so intricately linked through these neural circuits. And we've also seen how these biological principles are genuinely inspiring innovation in robotics, leading to more adaptable, more capable machines.
Right. And while it's still definitely a theoretical area, based on our sources today anyway, the potential for a deeper understanding of CPGs and this respiratory muscular timing,
Yeah.
the potential for that to inform and maybe even optimize manual therapy techniques in the future, well, it presents a really intriguing avenue for future research.
It certainly does. And it leaves us with this thought, maybe for you, our listener, as we continue to uncover the secrets of the body's intrinsic rhythms. How else might we harness this knowledge, to enhance movement, recovery, perhaps overall well-being?
Yeah.
It's a vast and exciting field, clearly, with potential implications spanning neurobiology, robotics, and the fascinating science and art of manual therapy. Thanks for diving deep with us today.